Welcome to All About Capital Campaigns, a podcast that provides fuel for your nonprofit's growth. Each week, hosts Andrea Kihlstedt and Amy Eisenstein, co-founders of the Capital Campaign Toolkit, provide practical tips about raising more money for your nonprofit organization. The Capital Campaign Toolkit is a support system for nonprofit leaders who are running capital campaigns. At capitalcampaigntoolkit.com, you can download a step-by-step guide for your capital campaign and get many other free resources. Here are your hosts, Amy and Andrea.
Hello, everybody. I'm Amy Eisenstein. I'm super excited to see you here. Andrea is off in California with her whole family, her kids and her grandkids, celebrating all sorts of occasions, including her birthday, which was yesterday. And so today I am very excited to have actually a good friend and colleague of both mine and Andrea's. But I will tell you, I am super excited to have Andy Robinson here with us today. He is... his resume speaks for itself, but I will tell you, one of his many claim to fames is co-authoring a book with Andrea called Train Your Board and Everyone Else to Raise Money. And I have to tell you that it is my go-to training book, and it has been since it was published, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, Andy, would you say?
I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right.
And Andy has written several other books. I'm going to let him share some of them, but he is an expert in training, among many other things. And people know him as the Swiss Army knife of nonprofit consulting because he does a little bit of everything. So if you're going to do a board training, whether you're hiring a facilitator or not, I would highly, highly recommend visiting Andy's website and getting this book, Train Your Board and Everyone Else to Raise Money. It is chock full of recipes, of training recipes and exercises. So, Andy, what do you want to say about yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started with training. And then we'll get into why it's important for everybody on the call today.
Okay, that's great. I'm Andy Robinson. I'm coming to you today from Plainfield, Vermont, which is where I live. I have been raising money for nonprofit organizations since 1980, so that's 42 years. I have had my own consulting practice doing these sorts of things for about 26, 27 years. So I'm a one-person business. And as Amy suggested, I support people with fundraising, planning, board development, marketing. I have facilitated mergers. I've done a little bit of nonprofit hospice care, help organizations pass away gracefully. And a lot of what I'm doing now is train the trainer and also helping people who are starting their consulting and training practices to build viable businesses. And it's that part of my work is not something I charge for. It's just something I do to support the community because people did that for me when I started out 20 odd years ago.
Yeah.
And I am a big fan of Andrea and I'm a big fan of Amy, and what they have built here is amazing. And they are both very skilled fundraisers and really thoughtful businesswomen and are good at this stuff. So the fact that you signed up for this and you're participating means you're very discerning because you've chosen good people to learn from.
Well, thank you, Andy. The feeling is absolutely mutual.
And so if you want your colleagues, board members, volunteers, staff members, whomever, to participate in fundraising effectively, they need to learn how to do it. You know, and back in the day for me, and this may have been true for Amy, a lot of it was trial and error. And, you know, I think what's happened in the last 20 odd years, and I can claim credit along with a lot of other people, is that we have professionalized the part of this where we train people how to do it. And so there are skills available and tools and techniques for how to be better at training people to embrace fundraising. So bottom line is any campaign you're doing is a team sport and you need a team. And if people are going to be on the team, they have to learn how to play the game and do it well. And I don't mean the game in a negative sense. I mean it in a positive sense. So, yeah, I think every successful campaign rises or falls based on the participation of your group. And if you want them to participate well, you have to teach them how to do that.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I love starting off with that quote from Kim or I don't know, philosophy that nobody comes out of the womb knowing how to fundraise. And I think, I think that goes beyond that. Nobody comes out of even college or business school or, most careers knowing how to or feeling comfortable with fundraising. It is a skill that we practice and learn. And the more we practice, the better we get. I mean, one of the analogies that I use is, it's hard to learn to swim, but you do it, you practice. First, you go underwater and you fail a few times.
You flop around a lot.
You flop around, learning to ride a bicycle, whatever, whatever skill you're learning with practice, you get better. And maybe those aren't quite the right analogies because I think any good fundraiser always has a few butterflies. There's always, some degree of nervousness, no matter how many times you've asked for a gift or requested funds, because every interaction with every donor is different. But there really is an element to practicing. And so, whether or not you like the word training, some board members don't want to be trained, but, if they practice, even I find that even some of the best fundraisers on our boards are always happy to have practice and get better. So Andy, what's a training exercise or two? What do you want to highlight? Let's get to some nitty gritty details of how people can really apply. What should they do with their boards?
So the first thing that I do generally is I try to redefine the word fundraising, because people assume that fundraising is asking. And, to be super clear, if nobody's asking for money, you're not raising any money. But fundraising is this whole suite of behaviors. It starts with identifying potential donors. We cultivate them, we educate them. When it's time, we ask them. When they give, we thank them, we appreciate them. We're looking for ways to involve them more deeply. And if we're good, we ask those people that we have involved more deeply to identify new donors that we can reach out to. And there are many names for what I just described, but generally it's some version of the cycle of fundraising, right? It's that whole suite of behaviors that we use to bring people in, solicit them, and connect them more closely to our groups. So, what I often, when I'm training boards or training people who are new to fundraising, I often start there because people have this phobia about the ask.
Yes.
And what I will say is not everybody's going to be an asker, and I'm okay with that, but I think everybody can be a fundraiser.
And
part of the
agree.
work in getting people comfortable with fundraising is to have them figure out where they fit on that cycle. And, in my fantasy world, everybody is comfortable asking, soliciting gifts. I have not found that world yet. So,
yeah,
right? So,
I've given up on that, I think, right?
Amen.
And you know what? I have to say, I want to emphasize that to everybody listening, because I think that's really important, because I think there's a lot of development directors and executive directors and maybe even board chairs who feel like every board member needs to ask for gifts. And it simply is not true. Every board member needs to help with fundraising, but it does not have to be asking. They can, as Andy said, they can help identify donors. They can help thank donors. They can help cultivate donors. There's lots of ways to get board members involved in fundraising. And sort of once you let them off that asking hook, they may sigh a big sigh of relief, and then, be more willing to help with thanking or cultivating or even identifying donors. And so that's a really, really important, very first basic, for many board members. Yeah. Okay, and good.
It takes the stress out of the room. So, and I will, I'll present this visually, and we can even share the exercise with you guys. It's easy to do, but it's basically this circle, and I will put it up on a screen or up on a flip chart or whatever tool I'm using. And I'm saying, like, not everybody's going to be here. And in fact, if you carve out the time allocation in terms of where you spend your time as a fundraiser, like 10% of the work is solicitation. And the other 90% is the things we do before and the things we do after. And so if you frame it up that way, again, people's stress level tends to drop. And then the question is, how do we plug you into this model? You, Sally, board member, you, Jose, board member, like, where are you on this, and and what'll happen, I think, is people may come in doing things that feel less stressful, like writing a thank you note or hosting a party or whatever their comfort is. And once they've mastered that, you can say, okay, I'm going out to meet some donors. Would you like to come along and just see how that works? You can tell the story about why you're on the board, how you connect with the mission. I think it's awesome as a board member for you to do that. I'm staff. I can close the gift. I don't need you to ask for the money, but I'd love for you to observe how this conversation works. So there's a name for this in psychology. It's called aversion therapy. And if you're afraid of snakes, they put you in a room with snakes, right? If you're afraid of spiders, they put you in a room with spiders. People are afraid of donors for reasons that are unclear to me. But if you put them in a room with a donor and they observe that sort of conversation and they can see that donors actually don't bite, they're lovely people. They care about the mission. Many of them give money. And it's like, oh, that's not scary. So this is, I don't know if this is a second step, but this in essence is another form of training, is to bring board members along with staff or seasoned solicitors to just observe how it works, because that demystifies it. And what's nice about that, that's not training with a capital T. That's like, I'm going along to see somebody. Would you come with me and just tell them why you care, and you can observe the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a great model to think about. Having a mentor system, right? Yep. You can either mentor from staff to board member, or even board member to board member. Maybe you have 2 or 3 board members who are competent, capable, experienced, comfortable solicitors who would be willing to bring along another board member to have them shadow them and serve as a mentor.
And then you debrief it after. You sit in the car, or you sit on the bus, or you sit in the coffee shop. And it's like, what did you observe? Like, when I said this, she said this. How do you think I reacted? Did I handle it well? How would you have handled it? And spend a little time to unpack it together. So, Amy, you've trained a lot, and I'm going to let you get in here. I mean, do you have a favorite exercise, or if people are starting to grasp the fundraising isn't solicitation only, it's this whole suite of behavior, where would you take them next?
Yeah. So I think that it's both important to start. I start exactly what you just described as not everybody needs to be a fundraiser. In fact, I tell them.
No, pause. Not everybody needs to be an asker.
Thank you.
Everybody needs to be a fundraiser.
I totally misspoke. Thank you for stopping me there.
You're welcome.
You're absolutely right. Not everybody needs to be an asker, but everybody does need to be a fundraiser for sure. And, it's interesting. Sometimes I actually don't want everybody to be askers who are just so uncomfortable, because what happens is that they ultimately don't do what they're supposed to do, or they under ask. So I'm happier to have those people get comfortable and be good and solid thankers and identifiers. But I think it is important to have some, dreaded role play. I'm going to go there with dreaded role play.
Do it.
I love that you actually, bring training into real world scenarios and actually have people shadowing people. I think that is absolutely a critical piece of this, because there's only so far you can go in a boardroom or in a sort of a made up scenario. But I think I like to have people break into groups of 3, right? You have one person as the solicitor, one person's the donor, one person's the observer. And instead of giving people a made up scenario, I like to have them think of a real donor, right? Think of someone that you would like to ask, or that your organization, a real life donor.
Yes. And
what would you like to ask them for, and practice that. And I think that the key is having the observer give both positive and constructive feedback. Let's put it that way. How do you set up those practice scenarios?
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite exercises, and we called it in the book. We called it the trio ask, though it has many different names. What you just said is absolutely true. And what I will do to make this very clear to people is, if it's Amy and Andrea and Andy, and we're in the group, and I'm the solicitor, I might say, okay, who am I soliciting? And Amy says, I'll volunteer to be that person. And I'm going to say, okay, you're going to be my friend Joan. And Joan is 75 years old. She has given to my organization for multiple years. I know she is a big donor to other organizations. And she's only giving modest gifts to us. And I'm trying to find out why and hopefully get her to increase her giving. But I know she's capable of a much bigger gift because she's given these gifts to these other groups that I know about. So you're going to be Joan in the role play, and I'm going to be Andy. And we're going to practice, and Andrea is going to observe. So it's actually laying out in some detail Amy's role play, who she's going to be in this exercise. And in terms of the critique part, after you've done the role play, I would suggest that the asker, in this case it would be me, has to go first. And I would also suggest that I have to give myself 2 compliments and then 1 suggestion. And the tendency, if you do this, is to go to the negative. Oh, I stumbled over the words. Oh, I wasn't clear. Oh, I muffed the ask. And we have to sort of turn off that self-criticism in our heads. Yes. That's part of this training. So the rule is you have to give yourself 2 compliments, and then you can give yourself a suggestion. Amy would go next as the person being solicited, and she gives me, the asker, 2 compliments and a suggestion. And then Andrea, our observer, would jump in, and she would give 2 compliments and a suggestion. So this whole thing takes probably 20 minutes to do the whole thing. But if you're on the receiving end, you're going to get 6 compliments. And it's a running joke. It's like, when was the last time you got 6 compliments in 20 minutes?
I
right?
love that.
It's never happened.
I love starting with the person. Yeah. With the solicitor. I've never done that before,
yes.
But yes.
Make them say good stuff about themselves.
Yes.
Right? This is what and it's people struggle with it. Frankly, there's this awkward thing. And then if I'm like watching the room and I can see them, I say, are you done with the role play? Yes. Well, tell me 2 things you did well. They get there, right?
Right.
Like, I didn't die. I didn't have a heart attack, right?
Right. The donor
right?
didn't get up and walk out.
And I was authentic, right? I was nervous and I expressed that, and that was okay. I said, great, give yourself 1 suggestion. Next time I'm going to practice more than we have a chance to practice today, so I feel more comfortable.
Yeah. Excellent.
So those are 2 really good exercises. We have the cycle of fundraising, and then we have this trio role play where people are actually practicing asks with each other.
Excellent. I love that. All right. So I want to pause for 1 second and invite those folks who are with us live on Monday afternoon here to put in some questions. We'll be taking questions in just a minute, mostly focused on training, but I have to say, Andy's an all-around general fundraising expert, so feel free to let him rip. And if you're listening on the podcast, on the recording, then we will let's give them a few last words of wisdom before we turn to questions here. Okay.
So quick question from Lisa. After 20 minutes, do you rotate? Yes, yes, yes. The idea is that everybody plays all 3 roles. So right. This exercise takes about an hour. So that's a great clarification. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
While we're waiting for people to post questions, I have a question for you, Amy. And you can tell me if it's a good idea or a bad idea, and maybe we'll argue about it, because that's always more fun.
Love it.
What I recommend to people when they're new to this is to identify 2 or 3 or 4 donors that they can contact with the following pitch. And they can say, I'm learning how to raise money. We've been doing practices. I'm a little uncomfortable. I'd like to come on practice on you. Just so we're clear, it's a real ask. I hope you'll give money. But more than the money, what we really need is feedback. And you're smart. You've done this before. I would love to get with you, practice my ask with you, and get your feedback.
Yes.
So this requires some vulnerability, right? Because you have to be willing to say, I don't know what I'm doing here, but you can help me do it better. And I think we've all heard the great cliche, which is if you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice. So this is like the classic example of showing up to ask for advice in an authentic way, but you're probably going to get a gift out of sympathy or for no other reason because you made yourself vulnerable with the donor. Yeah. So I'm arguing for imperfection, and I would love to hear your take on that.
I think that is absolutely brilliant. I'm absolutely in favor of practicing in real scenarios. So the first step would be, let's break it down into steps. The first step would be to role play in a boardroom or in a training room, and then maybe to go out and shadow someone and mentor, watch someone who's good at it. And then the next step would be to call up, I actually have people do this with board members, with each other. Say, I'm coming to practice, but I'm really going to ask you. So board members can ask one another. I
like it.
And then, of course, ask for feedback, debrief afterwards. Say, listen, I'm really asking, and I want your feedback as well. And you can even say, listen, tell me what I did well and tell me what I should have done better.
Right. So let me also put the snort. I mean, there's a couple of parts of this which are unexpected. Number one, because it's practice and everybody knows it's practice, it's less stressful. Number two, as I mentioned, you're probably going to get a gift out of sympathy for no other reason. But number three, you just added someone to the fundraising team, because anyone who's critiquing your pitch and helping you get better at solicitation is now a member of the fundraising team. So the more people who are helping, generally speaking, the more money you're going to raise, the more allies you have in the community who are supporting the campaign. So I think it's like a 3-for-1. The risk is that you do it badly, but it's practice.
Yeah.
Right? And if somebody doesn't want to be practiced on, they'll say, no, thank you, Andy, find someone else to practice on. But I do like your idea of starting with the board members working with each other. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. And then you're going to go out to other donors. I can't now. I just was going to say something and it vanished. Poof.
Well, we have Q&A in the box, so let's do some of those.
All right. Okay. Let us wrap up just the podcast portion. So any final thoughts for our podcast listeners? And then we'll turn to Q&A and keep discussing this. And those of you listening to the podcast, if you want to catch the Q&A next time, sign up at www.toolkittalks.com, and you will be able to join us and ask your questions live and in real time. So Andy, what's one final training tip before we turn to questions that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, one final tip is this. The word trainer or facilitator can be really intimidating. Like, I'm not professional. I'm going to hire somebody to do that. And I wouldn't stress about it. I mean, one advantage of writing a book about this stuff is you have to take all your wisdom and carve it up into pieces and write it on the page so it's transparent. But, somebody told me once, an expert is anyone who knows 5% more than the other guy. And that's sort of how I live my life. I don't have a lot of deep expertise, but I know enough to get through whatever I'm doing. And I feel like you should bring the same attitude to this job. Maybe you're not a trainer with a capital T. It's okay. What you're doing is initiating a conversation, or you're giving people an exercise. And maybe you will facilitate that exercise imperfectly. It's okay. And, so the last thing I would say before we go to Q&A is trust the group. Because if you show up and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm going to do this imperfectly, but I know the group is there to support me and help me, and we'll figure it out together. That's a really good way to do this, because it empowers the people in the room. And they're not on the receiving end of the training. They're actually co-creating the training. And if you can let the group be that sort of group, this will be much easier for you.
I want to add, and be prepared. You don't want to show up in front of your group unprepared. So yes. Andy, if people want to learn more about training from you, where can they find you?
My main website is andyrobinsononline.com. And then trainyourboard.com is the blog, the e-news, the book. There's videos. There's all sorts of cool stuff in there. So that's trainyourboard.com. And if you contact me, I'm happy to add you to my e-list, and we'll notify you of upcoming trainings and blogs, posts, and so forth.
Excellent. All right, Great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that wisdom.
Thanks for joining Amy and Andrea for today's All About Capital Campaigns. To learn more about them and their work together, go to capitalcampaigntoolkit.com. This podcast is recorded on a live webinar every Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can join the live sessions and get your questions answered by signing up today at toolkittalks.com. And please like, rate, and review us on your favorite podcasting platform.